Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Mike McKinsey, and he's going to share his near-death experience with us today. Hi, Mike.
Hi, thanks for having me, Peggy.
You ready to do this?
Sure.
Is it okay if I just let you take the floor?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, start wherever you
So,
like and take as long as you like.
okay. My NDE happened, well, not during my son's wedding, but shortly after. He was getting married in Ventura, which is it's on the Southern California coast, and it's about 5 hours from our home in Central Valley. So we decided to make it kind of a short vacation. We got there on a Wednesday afternoon, and the wedding was going to be on Saturday. So we checked into the hotel, and my kids were really into baseball, so they brought their wiffle balls and wiffle bats, and we went to the park next door and played a little home run derby. And I bring that up because I'm out there swinging a baseball bat, twisting my abdomen, which I hadn't swung a bat in a couple of years, and I'm trying to beat these young kids. Um, so
We don't
anyway,
know
just kind
we're
of keep
old
that.
yet, do we?
Well, after that, I felt a little old. Um, so that night, we played for a couple hours. That night, I started feeling sick, and I thought, maybe I'm getting the flu. Didn't think much of it. Thursday rolls around. We spent the day spent the day kind of sightseeing with with my son's wife to be, her parents. They lived there in Ventura, and so we spent the day with them, had a nice lunch, went out to dinner, saw the pretty beaches and everything that Ventura has to offer. And I started feeling a little sicker that night. And I just kept thinking, oh no, this flu is getting worse. And, please, Lord, just don't let me get sick for my son's wedding. Friday rolls around. I started running a fever. And Friday was big day because we had to go get the tuxes. We had the rehearsal dinner. And that was all fun. And I kept telling everybody, I'm feeling like I'm getting the flu, but I'm paying for this dinner, so I'm going to be eating all of my food. I'm having one of every one of the desserts. I'm not going to let this, I'm not going to pass up this opportunity, right? So we get back to the hotel, and my son and I were at the hotel bar having a glass of wine, and he says, we're trying to figure out what's going on, what the problem could be, why I'm getting sick. And he says, maybe you got some kind of a blockage. And I said, a blockage? I've never even heard of that. He says, well, maybe, when's the last time you were able to go to the bathroom? And I said, come to think of it, it's been a couple of days. I mean, it's a little embarrassing, but, he says, yeah, maybe that's it. You should try getting some laxative. And I said, okay, clean me out before the wedding. That would, if that worked, that would be great. So we ended up going to bed. Everybody in my whole family's asleep in the hotel room. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, I thought, my stomach hurts so bad. I'm gonna head down to the quick stop and get some laxative, like he said, and get some Tylenol for the pain. And so I did that, came back, and the Tylenol worked a little bit, took away some of the pain. Of course, the laxative didn't do anything. And so the day of the wedding, Saturday morning, everybody wakes up, and I hadn't slept at all because I was just so miserable. And I was pretty sure that something serious was going on, but I still kept thinking it's just the flu. I'll be fine. Get through the wedding. So we did. We went to the wedding. It was at a golf course in Ventura. It was beautiful, beautiful day. Um, we got through the whole reception, and then afterwards, after the reception, some of the guests started leaving, and Heather, the bride, said, we're going to head over to mom and dad's house. They had a beautiful condo overlooking the ocean. She says, we're going to take the presents over there and keep the party going, open up the presents. And I finally said, guys, I got to go get checked out. I mean, I'm just miserable. I mean, you can see in the wedding photos, my skin's pale. I mean, I'm sweating. I'm really hot now. I can tell I have a fever. And I thought maybe it's not the flu. So my son was in the medical field. He told me what hospital to go to. We went to the ER. We checked in. Had to wait for about an hour because it's Saturday night. It's pretty crowded. And they called me back. And they put me on this table. And the nurse takes a blood, and she sends it off to the lab. And she does a few other tests. She's kind of pushing on my abdomen. She says, it sounds like it's probably your appendix. And I said, yeah, I don't think it'd be my appendix. I always heard it, your abdomen's really sore in this one spot. And I said, my stomach hurts, but I think it's just the flu. So she pokes around a little bit on my abdomen, and she takes out one of these little mallets that they check your reflexes with, their little rubber mallet. And she taps the bottom of one of my feet, and she says, does that hurt? And I said, no, of course not, and then she taps the other foot, and the pain in my abdomen just sent me through the roof, and I screamed. And she says, yeah, that's your appendix. You've probably ruptured your appendix. She says, have you been doing any unusual physical activities lately? And I thought, well, Wednesday I played home run derby with the kids. And, I told her that. And she says, well, you may have ruptured it. I mean, if it was swollen, it's possible. So I'm thinking Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. This is the fourth day, So no wonder I'm getting sick if I've got this, if my appendix have ruptured, I could be in some trouble here. So they called in a surgeon. He comes in and he says, yeah, I'm looking at your blood cell count. Your white blood cell count is pretty high. So that means your body's trying to fight these germs off. He says, we're going to open you up and see what's going on. He says, I'll go in through your belly button with a scope first to see how it is. So they wheel me back into the surgery room. They put me on this little surgery table. It's freezing cold. And right when she puts on the mask, I'm out, but I look to my right, and Jesus is standing next to me in a white robe. And he's not floating. He's not, this is like a man standing next to my bed. And he holds out his hand and he says, I want to answer your prayer. And I'm thinking, what the heck is going on here? What is happening? I'm kind of counting back in my head. Okay, I was at the wedding. I'm at the hospital. I should be in surgery right now. And I thought, I must be dead because Jesus is here. He's taking me to heaven. But he didn't say I'm taking you to heaven. And now my analytical mind is thinking, this is so weird, because I think I've heard of people when they die, they leave their body, they look down at their body, they're floating. And I thought, I'm not floating, but this is physical Jesus standing here. So what choice do I have but to take his hand? And he says, I want to answer your prayer. So now I'm curious. So I grab his hand. As soon as I do, we're standing on this, it looks to be like a hill. Everything is super white around me. I can see nothing except Jesus next to me. And I look down below my feet, and there's like this dark bluish green grass. And I can count every single blade of grass that's touching my feet. My senses were heightened to that point. And I look up, and a little off to my right, about eye level, a little bit higher, there's like this light source. It's like a round light source. And it's brighter than the rest of the white. At this point, everything is still white around me. It's almost like a white fog, but it's super bright. And this light source starts sending off these things. They look like fluorescent light tubes, like the shop tubes that you put up in your shop. But these things are about 2 feet long, and they're a little bit fatter than a fluorescent tube. And they start coming at me like this, all around, going flying past my face. And one of them is coming right at my forehead. And when it hits my head, it makes kind of a buzzing sound as it goes through me, and it warms me like down to my toes. I'm just like this nice warm feeling. And I thought, well, that's weird. So I look back at the light source, and as I do, all of a sudden, all the white fog that's blinding me almost gets pulled like from my right to my left, like somebody's pulling a curtain open. And as they do, I look below me. I see that I can see I'm standing on a mountain, and in front of me, there's these kind of wispy looking little flowers. They're maybe a foot tall, and they look like they're kind of bending in a breeze, but there's no wind that I can feel. And they were like really pretty pastel colors, like purples and yellows and blues, and just really beautiful little flowers. And then at the bottom of that, there's now it seems like the fog that is, or what I call fog or veil or whatever, it seems like it's settled in the bottom of this valley that's at the bottom of this hill. And there's these building tops that are popping out from the fog. And one of them looks like a big giant Capitol dome. It's gold. There's a couple other smaller gold buildings, and then there's these real tall, like white spires, like a steeple at a church. But one thing I noticed was that there was no crosses at the top of these spires. And I thought it was kind of interesting. And then on the other side of that, there's another mountain, and there's like pine trees on there, but they're perfectly shaped. And above that is like the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen, with these super vivid, almost neon colors, like reds and oranges and yellows. And then at the very top is like a blue and a light blue. There's some wispy clouds. And I just thought, wow, this is just so beautiful. Now, the light beams are still coming at me, and now they're going across to the other across the valley in the other mountain. And one of the light beams goes up and it hits the tip of one of the trees, these little beautiful pine trees, and it looks like it has like a diamond on the tip of it. And when that one light beam hits the diamond, it bursts into hundreds of tiny little light beams, and they just shoot everywhere. And pretty soon, more of these light beams hit the curtains, the diamonds, the tips of all these trees, and now we have like these light beams just going everywhere. It's like bright white fireworks just exploding everywhere in this light, or in the sky. And I looked back at the light source, the where these beams are emanating from. And when I look at it, Jesus says to me, "It's the glory of the Lord." And
It's glory of the Lord.
sorry, it's the glory of the Lord. Gets me a little emotional still,
Oh.
even though this is 20 years ago. And when he said that, I just got so weak in my knees that I fell to my knees. When my knees hit the ground, they shocked me and they brought me back. And so instantly I'm laying on a bed in the hospital again. And I'm looking up and I see a doctor leaning over me, and he's wearing a mask. And he says, "Do you know your name?" And I answered him, but then he asked me again. And I realized that I didn't open my mouth to tell him my name. I just kind of said it in my head. And he says again, "Do you know your name?" And I said, "Mike." But, when I talked, it was my voice was just so dry, but I did manage to say Mike. And he goes, "Do you know where you are?" And so again, I start thinking back, well, I think I might have just been in heaven, but I'm thinking, okay, surgery, I must still be in Ventura. So I said, "Yeah, I'm in Ventura." And he looks around at everybody in the room and he says, "Okay, he's back." And I kind of, I'm laying on my back, and I'm really super weak, and I'm hot, I'm still sweating, and I feel like I'm wet all over, like I'm just sweating bullets. And he looks around and he says he's back. And then there's about like 5 or 6 people in the room, and I'm guessing they're nurses because they're wearing scrubs. Some are light blue, scrubs. Some are dark blue scrubs. And one of the guys in the room walks by and he taps me on the leg and he says, "Hey, take it easy, buddy," or "Take care, buddy." And I'm just thinking, man, what the heck just happened? I mean, this is so bizarre. And then, so they wheeled me out of that room in my bed. They wheeled me up to ICU, and I ended up staying there for 4 days and ended up with a complication. I developed an abscess, and so I ended up spending 12 days in the hospital.
Wow.
But so that's the near-death experience. And then, when it took me 3 days before I could tell my wife what had happened, because every time I opened my mouth to tell her, I just start crying. And she kept saying, it's okay, it's okay. And I go, I gotta tell you this, you're not gonna believe it. But yeah, 3 days later, I was finally able to get it out and say, this is what happened to me.
What was her
And
reaction?
I kind of I reflected back and I thought, okay, what, when Jesus came to me, he said, I want to answer your prayer. And he
Mhm.
held out his hand. And I thought, okay, what prayer? I don't remember praying, well, I want to die,
Right.
but I do remember as a kid, I used to pray to God and say, I need to see heaven, because when I was a little boy, my grandfather passed away, and it was the first experience I had with death. And at the funeral, everybody was saying, Grandpa's in a better place. He's in heaven now. And I remember talking to God and saying, okay, God, I need to see heaven. You're going to have to show me, because this mind, I've always said I need to take apart the watch to see the gears and the springs to know how it works. I've got this analytical mind. I need to know, I need more than just faith. And I think God waited about 40 years to answer that prayer.
Mhm. And that's something they don't forget, do they?
No. And the Bible says what 1,000 years is like a day. And I think God kind of proved that to me. And the other thing is, it's funny because when I was a young kid too, I remember watching the Charlie Brown Christmas special. And it always struck me when Linus would come out onto the stage and everything got quiet. And he has his little blanket, and he started telling the story from Luke about the birth of Jesus. And he says, the glory of the Lord shone all around them. And I used to think, the glory of the Lord, what is that? That must be pretty cool. I mean, you're talking about God made the universe and everything that I know, and the earth, and gosh, what's his glory look like? So I used to pray as a kid too, show me your glory. And so God hit a little double header that day. He answered two prayers in one trip.
What did your wife say when you told her?
She had a weird reaction, like almost like unbelief at first, and like it didn't hit her emotionally like it did me. And I thought, well, okay, that not everybody's going to have that same response. I mean, it happened to me. I don't expect her to go, oh my gosh, but she was like, wow, that's really cool. That's about all I got out of her. And when I told one of my friends from church, he came over a couple days after I got home, and he walks in and he says, oh my gosh, Mike, what happened? Who are you and what'd you do with Mike, right? Because I'd lost 35 pounds in
Wow.
12 days in the hospital. I mean, I was skinny as a rail. But I told him about it. And when I started telling him, this is, now a couple weeks after it happened, I start crying. And he grabs my hand and he goes, come on, you can do this. You can tell me. Well, obviously it's something pretty traumatic. Tell me about it. And so I got it out, and he's crying and I'm crying, and he was just like, wow, he just kept saying, wow, wow, wow. So that was more of the response I thought that I would get from my wife, but everybody reacted differently.
It's a shocking thing, these near-death experiences, to come out and say, I saw Jesus. I was with Jesus, you know,
Yeah.
for it to even come out of your mouth, it feels strange. And then,
And then to have that physical experience too, I mean, people say, I see Jesus, I picture, Jesus floating, or, that's why I said it wasn't a spiritual thing. It was physical. And it was just so weird, just so strange.
what year was your NDE?
2004.
Had you heard of near-death experience before that?
Um, no, I mean, I had heard something like that. I'd heard of like out of body experiences. Um, I had heard of things, but I just never thought near death or NDE, or I just wasn't really into that. But then as I started learning about them, I thought, yeah, I don't know. It seems kind of weird. But then, you know, with my experience, I thought, well, maybe it does happen. Maybe it is real. But even today, I hear of some of them, and I think that's not really biblical, or something just doesn't sound right. And I think, well, maybe something happened, and they kind of embellish it to make it sound better or sound
Right.
really cool or whatever. Get some notoriety for themselves, but I don't know.
Now you published your book
What
in 2010.
2010, yeah. I mean, that's how long it took to write it. I'm not a writer, but I got pretty good reviews on it. I mean, people said, this is pretty neat.
Did you start right
But I didn't
away
write
after
it.
NDE trying to write it?
When I was in the hospital, I kept notes, because one of the things that happened was, well, when I finally was strong enough to hold a pen and a paper, or a notepad, I had my wife bring me a notepad so I could write things down. And one of the reasons was the NDE. I wanted to kind of write stuff down in case I forgot it. But the other thing is, I had this roommate that was just hilarious, and I used to write down all the funny stuff he was saying and doing. And after a few days, I got to know this one nurse, and I said, "Hey, if I uh, put together like a little pamphlet or something, she saw me reading the Bible in the hospital bed, and she came in and she said, I don't know how they do it without him. Some people do it without him." And I said, well, I'm a Christian guy. Would you mind if I wrote something out to kind of give people hope, tell them my experience, and that, that there is such a thing as Jesus in heaven. I didn't really tell her much about the NDE. I kind of said, I just had this weird thing happen, and I'd like to come back. So I thought, at first I thought, I'll write like a little pamphlet, or just something, and I can come back and talk to people that are really sick, and maybe try and, introduce them to Jesus. And she said, yeah, we'd love to have you. And so I went home and thinking, how can I do this? And here it was, 8 years later, I ended up writing Accidental Heaven. And I never did go back to the hospital. But of course, I'm in Georgia now, and California's a little ways away.
Did you start sharing your story publicly after your book was out, or was you still
I
writing?
I talked to, I talked to my church, and we had a real kind of a tight-knit Sunday school group. I told them, and then from then on, whenever I was the substitute Sunday school teacher, the topic was always heaven. And the friend that I told the story to, his name was Phil. He used to always say, "Oh yeah, Mike, Mike and Jesus are like this, and the
Oh,
rest of us are out here. So yeah, you go ahead and tell us how great heaven is, Mike."
he sounds like
But
a good friend.
he's a great guy. But no, I really didn't. And I think one of the reasons was that, like, when I stood up in front of my church, I told my pastor, and of course, when I start telling my pastor, I'm crying, and he's crying. Um, he said, you got to stand up and tell the church. And I was like, man, I don't know if I can do that. I mean, I don't want to I'm not good at public speaking. I don't have a problem with it, but I said, this is really an emotional thing. And so I tried, and of course I'm standing up there in front of the church, and I'm crying, and, everybody else in the audience is crying. And I thought, this is not the what I want to convey to people is, you know, Jesus is supposed to be happiness and joy and, hope. And here I got everybody crying. But I think it was, maybe I was misreading that response.
Have been tears of joy.
But could be. Yeah. Yeah, certainly.
It's awesome. I was real shy before I started telling my NDEs, and um, in fact, the first time I was on a stage and I'm supposed to tell it, and they hand me the microphone, I almost bolted. I thought, I'm going to run to the bathroom crying. I'm going to get my husband and say, we're getting back on the airplane. We're flying back home. I can't do this. And I just said a little prayer, and suddenly I just knew that not to focus on myself, to put the glory, like you say, give God the glory, and let it happen what happens, and it went well. And I learned that when I tell my story, something else takes over. It's not me. I'm not lost for words because it feels like it's not me, like it's a deep part of my soul that's speaking, that's remembering. And it's just like this real letting go feeling. I don't know how you feel when you tell yours. You feel
Yeah,
something amazing.
that's kind of the way it has the way it's become. You know, when I wrote the book, I did interviews and I did some, you know, some book signings and talking to people um and it, you know, obviously gets easier with the passage of time. It doesn't hit me as much, but there are certain moments that, you know, I mean, I never really thought, you know, I'm a really emotional guy, but I guess when it comes to the Holy Spirit, I am. And that's the Holy Spirit speaking through me, like you said, something takes over. And it definitely does. And now it does too. You know, I don't, I think it's kind of cool to tell people this story because they, you know, they think, don't be afraid of death. I mean, there's more. Heaven is real, you know, to quote the little kid book, heaven is real. It's a real place. And it's something to look forward to.
Yeah, I think if somebody would have me get on a stage in front of people and talk about anything else, I could not do it. I would be stumbling on the first sentence and just get down and say, nope. But it's like this one thing, it's like God knows who to pick. And when we're not professional speakers, before we have our NDE, we're not writers, authors, you know, we're none of this, crusaders.
Yeah.
But then afterwards,
Yeah.
it's like that's what we are. And we don't know it until we start trying, because I kept mine quiet for decades until we go to start speaking. And my husband used to say, who are you and what have you done with my wife? Because it just wasn't like
Right.
me to talk the way I would talk when I tell it. It's just like, so I said, something
Yeah.
takes over
Yeah.
and it's
Well, and the
effortless.
Bible's full of people like that, you know. They say Moses wasn't a good speaker, but you know, he did his thing. I mean, Jesus doesn't call people who are necessarily qualified for the job, but he puts them in that position. And you know, now I'm just to the point where I think I just wanna share this with people and make an impact for the kingdom, you know, reach somebody out there that's going to hear it and think, oh, maybe this Jesus thing is real, you know, maybe I should look into it. And I think someday we're going to be able to sit down with God in heaven and he's going to say, because you did this broadcast or this, because you wrote this book or you know, made this Facebook post or whatever, however insignificant we think it is at the time, uh, this is the impact that it had. And there's always that ripple effect, you know, where I can tell somebody something and maybe that's not the person that needs to hear it, but they go home and they tell somebody else, or they, you know, tell their kids and their kids have kids and, you know, it's the ripple effect. And we'll just never know that in this lifetime, but hopefully someday God will sit us down and say, because of you, you know, 5 generations from now, somebody became a Christian. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
That's really my purpose. I mean, I think that's everybody's purpose as a Christian.
And videos and books, they lay around for a long time. Who knows in the future who will pick it up or see that video or talking to somebody a while ago and they'd never heard of a certain NDE and he'd been out for years, but it's when she happened to hear it that changed her life and made her start wanting to talk about her NDE. And it was like, gosh, you know, he's been around for a while, but you know, and NDEs was around a long time before I ever heard the word and didn't even know what to look up or what mine was called. Or and then when I started hearing them, like, these sound so familiar, and I didn't realize for a long time that mine was an NDE because mine was so different from everybody else's. And something you said a while ago struck me as, you know, that's what got me to start talking. Is I got thinking, you know, I don't want to tell this. People will think I'm a fool. They'll think I'm crazy. All these things, and then I thought, when I die for good, is God going to say to me, "Why did you tell anyone? I gave you your life back." You know, I begged to return to raise my boys, and I didn't. I mean, I told a few people a few months afterwards, but, you know, and then I kept it quiet for longest time. And then I started hearing other people talk about theirs, and mine didn't seem important. It didn't seem were there. And then I thought I would have to answer to God because I didn't want to look like a liar. I didn't want to look stupid. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want that day. You know, I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
face God in shame that I didn't do anything for him in return for him giving my life
Right.
back.
Right.
And so I thought,
Right.
I'm doing this, and people can throw rocks at me, they can laugh at me, they can try to put me in a funny farm, for sounding crazy, anything they want to do, but I'm going to tell them the truth, and that's what's just going to happen. So here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it took a long time to write the book. It took a long time to do like, well, I mean, the NDE happened 20 years ago, and we're talking. People are going to see our conversation. Uh, Maybe that's just all in God's timing. So I don't question it anymore, but I feel like I have, I'm 64 years old, so I don't know how much more time I have on this earth to do what he wants me to do. And I just feel like that's like now that's my calling. I need to get out there and let people know, hey, Jesus is real, God is real, heaven's real. It's
Yeah. I'll be
this
63 next
life is
week,
temporary.
and after I turn 60, it changes you. I didn't know what I'd feel like at 60, but we retired, and I started thinking 60, gosh, how long do I have? Like I look at the obituaries, a lot of people die in their 60s and 70s,
Sure.
and 80s and 90s are out there, but that's not guaranteed. And so I was like,
Right.
gosh, like any day now, I don't know. Like you can't say, right? You can't say I got this long. You don't have your expiration date. And I don't, a lot of
That's
people my
true.
age think they're going to live till they're 100. I'm like, well, I don't know if we're going to get that far. Not that many do,
Yeah.
because the life expectancy for
Yeah.
men is like 79, I think, women like 82 or something. But that's not even
Yeah.
saying that we're going to get that. So what are we going to do with this time we got left? I'm not going to spend it on
Right.
stupid stuff like cleaning house, mowing my yard. I mean, come on, there's going to be something else. I mean, things, yeah, we got to do, but I mean, just seems like, okay, this is the icing on the cake here, right? Like, what
Yeah.
do we
This is
leave
what it's all about.
behind? Because I was
Right.
25 when I had my last NDE. I had two. The first one was drowning at 5. And so the second was at 25. And my first moment in the, bright white light, I thought, gosh, 25 years old, and my boys was little, and time they'll forget me, and it's like I never lived. I felt like I was so shy and quiet. I kept everything inside. I didn't have opinion. People sit around, my ex-husband's from a big Catholic family, argue politics or whatever. I never had an opinion. And it's like I felt like it didn't even matter that I lived. I didn't make an impact. And I'll never forget that. And so now that I'm, in my 60s, I think, well, are you happy with the impact? If not, what else can you do? So,
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. That's great.
so is there anything else you wanted to talk about that we didn't cover?
Um, Gosh, I could tell you kind of a cool story.
Okay.
Um, and it just has to do with the fact that some people, when they hear of NDEs, well, especially now with social media, you post something about an NDE and you'll always get the haters and the people that say, God's not real. And I have so many stories about, you know, hearing from God and you know, I talk to God all day long. I'm just in constant prayer, talking to him when I'm alone. It's not just me, it's me and God. We're walking, and I mean, I've asked him to help me find tools around the ranch before, and just miraculously things will show up. But one of the neatest stories happened when the church that I was going to at the same time that the NDE happened. I was going to this church, and they decided to raise money to send neighborhood kids to church camp. And they said it's going to cost $50 per kid, And what we want to do is we want to walk around to the neighborhoods and ask if they would like to send their kids during summer to this church camp. And the hope was that, you know, you get the kid to go to the church camp, and then you get mom and dad to come to the church grows, everybody gets to know Jesus, and, you know, it's kind of a win-win for everybody. And they said it's going to cost $50. We're going to have this fundraiser spaghetti dinner on this Sunday night. So my wife and I and the kids, we all go to this church dinner. We're sitting at the spaghetti dinner, and this guy is standing up in front of the crowd, and he's telling everybody about this program. And I hear somebody behind me, an audible voice says to me, "I want you to give $1,000." And I kind of went, well, you know, and the voice says again, "I want you to give $1,000." This time I turn around real quick because I thought somebody was messing with me, you know, talking in my ear. It was like someone was talking. And I said, "I don't have $1,000 to give." And my wife looks over at me, she says, "What?" And I said, "Did you say something?" And she says, "No." And I said, "That is weird." And then the guy starts talking, and all of a sudden the voice says, "You'll get it back." And again, I turn around, there's nobody there. I mean, there's everybody sitting down listening to this guy talk. So you know, people started talking, and it was getting louder. And I thought, I need to get away. I need to go talk to God. So I got up and left. I walked out to my car, and I sat down, and I prayed in my car, and I said, "God, are you telling me to give $1,000 and that I'll get it back?" And didn't hear another word. And I thought, well, you know, what's he going to do? Say it again? I mean, he's already told me twice. He said, "I'll get it back." You know, he's given me the command. Now it's my job to get my checkbook and write the check. And so I did. I got up, I got my checkbook. And as I'm walking in, a friend of mine comes up to me, and he says, "Are you okay?" Because he saw me leave. And I came back in with my checkbook. And I said, "Dude, you're not going to believe this. I just heard God say, I want you to give $1,000. And when I said I don't have $1,000 to give, he said, you'll get it back." And my buddy goes, "Whoa." And he says, "So if God told you that, he knew that you would tell me that, and then and that I would take that as a challenge. So if you're going to write $1,000 check, I'm writing $1,000 check." And he says, "Are you going to do it?" And I said, "Yeah, I have to." And he says, "All right, let's go." So we each wrote $1,000 check, and we gave it to him. And, you know, they were all happy about it. So the next day I come home for lunch, and I walk in to my house. I sit down at my computer, and I had done some day trading with stocks, you know, not penny stocks, but just, you know, I was trying to do some day trading investing. And I thought, if I make, you know, $10, $20 a week, it's a win, you know, it's extra money. So I had this TD Ameritrade account, and I log onto my account, and I look at the numbers, and in my TD Ameritrade account, there was an extra $1,000. And I thought, whoa, $1,000. So I start scrolling through, and I go, okay, this is the stock. This stock went way up. It was some speculative stock. It went way up. So I thought, okay, sell it. Boom, sold it, got an extra $1,000. And as I'm logging off, I go, $1,000? Wait a minute. And I thought, my check hasn't even cleared that I wrote to the church yet. And I just got the $1,000 back. God said I would get it back. So I pick up my phone as I'm walking out the door, and I called my friend. I go, "You're not going to believe it, but I just got the money back." And he's like, "What?" I said, yeah. God just gave me $1,000 back. So pretty incredible that,
Awesome.
you know, yeah. And I was really happy that I listened to him, and you know, here I'm giving money that he was giving me back. And it was just kind of I don't know, step of faith. But it's kind of proof to me that, you know, God still speaks to us. And that time it was in an audible voice. And man, I
Yeah.
just, I couldn't believe that one.
Yeah. I said before on here, I heard God say audible one to me one time. My ex had just asked for a divorce, and he says, "I'm going to start taking the kids for their visit now." And they left. And we live out in the country. The house is real quiet, no TV, radio, or nothing. My house was so quiet, it just hurt my ears. It's like my family's gone, you know. And so I sat down on the toilet and I just started praying and crying and sobbing, saying, God, my parents hated me, my siblings hated me, my coworkers hate me. Now my husband of 16 years hates me. I'm sobbing, my face is burning red, and I'm bawling. And over to the sink, the mirror, because I could tell where it come from. That's a physical place. I heard, my child. And I jumped up, and now I could feel how cold my tears were. They were ice cold coming down my hot face, and I'm dancing around rejoicing. That's right. He's the only family I need. Of course, he gave me custody of my sons, it was just he got visitations, but all these other people, they didn't matter. Besides my boys, all the family I needed was God, and I heard his voice, my child. And it was such
Wow.
it was male, it was a loving, like my child, and I'm his daughter, like I'm not nobody's daughter. I'm not nobody's brother. I'm God's child. And so, yeah, I'll never forget. So anytime I ever heard audible, I've had, these strong inside my head leading me, telling me this or that. But it's anytime I heard audible. So,
It's
yeah.
amazing. Yeah, that's cool.
So, well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I'll put the link to your book in the description. And
Okay.
now your book is fiction, is that right? Like your NDE is true, but your book, you add some
Yes.
fiction in there to keep the book
Yeah.
going or whatever.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, I just pulled a lot of the stories. In fact, the $1,000 story is in there. That my character is Michael. But yeah, I just thought, because it was that the physical presence, and where I was a physical place. I thought, well, the Bible gives us clues. I mean, when Stephen was stoned to death, it says that heaven was open and he saw Jesus standing. He didn't see Jesus floating. He didn't see a ghost. He saw Jesus standing at the right hand of God, of the throne. And there's other clues in the Bible that heaven could be a physical place. I mean, could God put it there? Sure. He make heaven anywhere he wanted. So I just thought, well, let's write a fictional novel and kind of explore that, and then weave in the near death stuff. The whole hospital thing is all true. Man, the complication that I had was I developed an abscess, and I kept running a fever, so they wouldn't let me go home. And so they finally let me have solid food. They said, okay, this is like 7 or 8 days in. I think it was eight. On the eighth day, they gave me solid food. And they said, we can't find the abscess. We're just going to have to treat it with, antibiotics, and we'll just keep hoping that your temperature goes down. And so they give me solid food. And as I take my first bite, the nurse comes in and says, stop eating. They found the abscess. And I'm
Oh,
like, well, I just ate a bite of, turkey and gravy, and it was really good. And she says, okay, well, let's figure out what we're going to do. And then they let me eat that meal. And she says, okay, we'll go NPO after midnight. We'll go get the abscess the next day. And that was a whole interesting little saga too. So the abscess, the burst appendix releases all this E. coli, and that's what kills you. And that's something that I probably should have said during my NDE account too, was, after it was over, the surgeon came in and he says, yours is the worst case I've ever seen. And this is an old guy. He's probably like 70 years old. And then he walked out, and then he kind of swung back in and he says, that actually wasn't exactly true. Yours was the worst I've ever seen where the patient lived. He said, you really shouldn't be here. He said, when I was operating on you, it was so bad, I thought, I'm cleaning out a dead man. And he said, whatever your purpose is, God's not done with you yet. And he was right. So anyway, the abscess, I developed this golf ball size abscess. He cleans out all he can. And then whatever germs are left, I'll get together. They come together and they try to finish you off. And so I had this golf ball size abscess in my abdomen, my lower abdomen. And in order to get it, they had to put a drain in there with a needle the size of a pencil. and they have to go in through your butt cheek because there's
Oh,
organs in the front, and there's, that's a clear path to where it is. So they
huh.
would stick this needle in. They would like slide me back into this camera, take a picture, and they go, okay, we're right on target. They'd come back out, they push it in farther, slide me back in, take another picture until finally they, got it. They left the drain in and they sucked it all out. A couple of days later, I was released. But
I know it's
that was
awful
something.
timing of your son's wedding to be sick. I'm just curious, have you ever wondered, like, what if it didn't happen then? Like, what if you went to the hospital, or what if you went sooner, or even go there, ask those questions? I was just kind of
Yeah,
wondering.
probably. Well, I mean, I'm a guy, so I don't like to go to the doctor. That's kind of who we are. We know something's wrong. We don't go to the doctor. We let it get out of control before we go. Um, so I don't know. But I think that God just used that as, hey, here's an opportunity. Get him flat on his back, so he'll listen to me. Because I was just too stressed out. I mean, I was I was working too much and missing a lot. And I just remember thinking, okay, when I leave this hospital room, I'm gonna stop and smell the roses. It's a cliche, but I'm doing it. And
Yeah.
I do to this day. I still do. I stop and look at the sunset and I appreciate all the beauty around me. So it changed
That's
me.
what that's what we're supposed to do now when we're retired, right? It's our time to smell the
Exactly.
roses.
Yep.
Okay. Like if we didn't get old and fat and tired, we wouldn't stop, right? We'd just keep right on working ourselves to the ground.
That's true.
So, all right. Well,
Yeah, I
thank
still
you.
work hard, but I feel it at the end of the day now, much more than, the old bones are hurting all the time now, but
Yeah,
I wouldn't have it any other way.
right. We're still here.
Yep.
So, all right. I'll send this out to you later today.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
Peggy.
Uh-huh. Bye.